Hi everyone, welcome back to Radio Night Crime. Before you drift off, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. If you're enjoying the stories, don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's relax and jump into tonight's case. Story 1. Julia Simmons was living with Stephen Nicholas, a divorced day trader, in his 3-bedroom home outside Portland, Oregon. According to Julia, she and Stephen met online when she was looking for a place to rent. She thought Stephen was charming and nice. While Julia and Stephen lived together, Stephen met Julia's 20-year-old daughter, Rhonda. Stephen, 10 years older than Rhonda, thought she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. Stephen became smitten with Rhonda. It was hard not to be. In addition to her beautiful looks, she had an incredible personality. What surprised Stephen the most was Rhonda appeared interested in him too, so they started to date. As their relationship progressed, Stephen and Rhonda became more serious. Eventually, the couple decided to live together, and Rhonda moved into Stephen's condo. During the time Stephen and Rhonda dated, he developed a close connection with her family, particularly her sisters Melanie and Tessa. Initially, when Rhonda and Stephen began their relationship, Tessa was only 9 years old. She found Stephen incredibly fun and playful, which made her enjoy spending time with him. Years went by and Stephen and Rhonda continued living together as a committed couple, but they never married. Rhonda often wondered what it would have been like to be married to Stephen. Her friends knew how badly she wanted to get married, and they felt she was holding out for hope. Stephen claimed they were going to get married in the summer of 2009 on his timetable. However, they did have a baby girl, and being a mother became the best part of her life. Her daughter became the focus of her world, and Rhonda cherished every moment she spent with her. She loved being a mom. Rhonda enjoyed being a mom and spending time with her daughter. However, she also yearned to restart her modeling career. According to Stephen, after Rhonda had their daughter, she was the heaviest she had ever been. Stephen claimed Rhonda felt disgusting. He said they made a commitment to hike the 25 best trails in Oregon together in an attempt to lose weight. After the birth of their daughter, Stephen expressed that things were going well in his and Rhonda's relationship, and they rarely argued. He believed that they had become stronger than ever before. However, a different story was told by Rhonda's friends. They revealed that Rhonda had confided in them about Stephen's abusive behavior. Rhonda had once taken pictures of her back using a mirror to document bruises caused by a fight with Stephen. On March 16, 2009, Stephen and Rhonda, who was 23, went on a hike on the Eagle Creek Trail. As the couple made their way down the trail, Rhonda captured a photo of Stephen using her cell phone. Before leaving for their hike, Rhonda jokingly texted her mother, "He's either going to give me a ring or throw me off a cliff. Ha ha ha." The weather was beautiful as they continued their walk. However, Stephen later claimed that Rhonda started to behave strangely. According to Stephen, Rhonda asked him what would happen if anything ever happened to her and if he would take care of their daughter. He said, "Of course." As the weather began to worsen, Stephen informed Rhonda that it was time to head home. Instead of turning back, Stephen claimed that Rhonda wrapped a towel around her shoulders, declared herself Supergirl, and started to run down the narrow, slippery pathway. Stephen claimed that he witnessed Rhonda slip and fall over the side of the Eagle Creek Trail, approximately 150 feet. After Rhonda fell off the Eagle Creek Trail, Stephen claimed that he hiked down to the ravine in which she had landed, because he couldn't get cell service and held her body. He tried to call 911 but had no service, leaving him no choice but to leave her behind. According to Stephen, he walked to the trailhead, where he finally managed to contact emergency services. Later that day, rescue workers removed Rhonda's body. According to Rhonda's family, Stephen showed no emotion during her memorial service. Stephen claims the exact opposite is true and said he was crying nonstop. And when he gets really sad, he shuts people out and wants to be alone. Shortly after Rhonda died, Stephen packed up his and their daughter's things and moved to the other side of Oregon with his daughter to live near his family. This move left Rhonda's family feeling suspicious. Rhonda's family wondered what had happened between the two of them during the moments leading up to Rhonda's death. In 2006, Stephen made a decision to relocate from the United States to China. This decision marked the beginning of a new chapter in his life. With his young daughter in tow, Stephen decided to settle in Wuxi, a city located approximately 75 miles outside of Shanghai. Stephen had lived in China during his first marriage and developed a love for the country and its people. While living in China, Stephen was hired to teach English to Chinese business people. His daughter Rhonda was adjusting to life in China quickly. Within 2 months of moving there, she had become fluent in Mandarin. Both Stephen and his daughter were thriving. During their time in China, Stephen met and fell in love with a woman named Landy Yin. Landy and his daughter formed a strong bond, with Landy taking on the role of a mother figure. Stephen appreciated how Landy had stepped in and embraced the role of a parental figure to his daughter. After 1 year of dating, Stephen decided to take his relationship to the next level by asking Landy to marry him. To his delight, she said yes. In February 2015, Stephen and his daughter flew back to the United States, where the couple planned to marry. They decided to have 2 ceremonies, one in America and one in China, to accommodate both of their families and friends. Stephen and his daughter arrived in the United States 1 day before his fiancée. As they got off the plane in San Francisco to catch their connecting flight to Oregon, an officer approached Stephen and informed him they needed to detain him because there was something wrong with his bag. Little did he know that this encounter would set off a chain of events that would change his life forever. Minutes later, the police arrived and separated Stephen from his daughter. Unbeknownst to him, the entire time he had been living in China, detectives had been working diligently on his girlfriend Rhonda's death investigation. Suspicious circumstances surrounding Rhonda's fall from Eagle Creek prompted them to keep the inquiry going, and they eventually came to the conclusion that Stephen was the one who was responsible for her death. Rhonda's mother had been instrumental in keeping the investigation open. She reached out to the detectives all the time asking for updates. The police arrested Stephen at the airport for Rhonda's murder and extradited him to Oregon. After Stephen was arrested, he claimed that he thought he was dreaming. Stephen hoped he would open his eyes and find himself home in China with Landy by his side. However, this was no nightmare. This was real life. Stephen's bail was initially set at $2 million. He spent the next 14 months behind bars awaiting his trial. The judge reduced Stephen's bail to $250,000, and his attorney secured the bond. Then Stephen was released with an ankle monitor. When Rhonda's family found out Stephen had been arrested for her murder, they were overjoyed at the news, knowing that justice was finally being served. Rhonda's mother, in particular, could not contain her emotions as she heard the news and burst into tears. The arrest of Stephen brought a sense of relief and solace to Rhonda's loved ones, who had been mourning her loss for years. After Stephen's arrest, his attorney took his investigative team to the Eagle Creek Trail, where Rhonda fell to her death. They wanted to conduct experiments to prove to the court that Rhonda slipped in an accident and was not pushed by Stephen. Stephen's defense attorney said the Eagle Creek Trail is one of the most hiked areas in the Columbia River Gorge because of the beauty of the area. During one of Stephen's preliminary hearings, the medical examiner who performed Rhonda's autopsy after her fall from Eagle Creek determined Rhonda's injuries were all below her waist. This discovery was pivotal to Stephen's defense strategy, as it provided them with an opportunity to argue that Rhonda had taken her own life. Stephen's defense team argued that the impact of hitting the ground caused Rhonda's broken pelvis and evidence she had fallen feet first, rather than tumbling head over heels, which would suggest she had been pushed. In addition to presenting evidence regarding Rhonda's injuries, the defense team also sought to utilize notes from her therapy sessions as evidence. These notes stated that Rhonda was depressed, but never expressed thoughts of taking her own life. Furthermore, Rhonda herself had described her relationship with Stephen as a loveless state. Stephen's defense team argued that Rhonda's depression and description of her relationship were indicators that she had chosen to take her own life. By presenting this evidence, they aimed to cast doubt on the prosecution's theory that Stephen had pushed Rhonda, causing the injuries that led to her death. Stephen later claimed that Rhonda was depressed and attempted to take her life multiple times before they ever met. Rhonda's family denied these allegations and accused Stephen of lying. Her loved ones claimed Stephen was blaming Rhonda for taking her life to get the attention off of him because he murdered her. According to Stephen, Rhonda also struggled with substance abuse since the age of 12. He alleged that she tried various drugs and had experimented with a wide range of substances. However, the medical examiner's report revealed only the presence of slight traces of marijuana and the prescription medication for anxiety and depression that Rhonda was taking due to struggles with postpartum. Disturbing evidence emerged during the preliminary hearings into Rhonda's murder. Shedding light on the involvement of Stephen, it was revealed that Stephen had been involved in a romantic relationship with Rhonda's 16-year-old sister, Melanie. This revelation raised eyebrows as Stephen was in his 30s while Melanie was still a minor. The state presented the court with the argument that Stephen's inappropriate relationship with Melanie could potentially be a motive for murdering Rhonda. Rhonda had become aware of her husband's actions behind her back, leading to tensions and a possible motive to kill her. After Stephen was arrested for Rhonda's murder, he was indicted on 2 counts of third-degree sexual assault and 3 counts of third-degree sodomy regarding his relationship with Melanie Castro, his girlfriend Rhonda's sister. While awaiting trial for Rhonda's murder in 2005, Stephen pleaded guilty to 2 counts of sexual abuse. The statement signed by Stephen read, "I had sexual intercourse with Melanie Castro twice." However, Stephen claimed that he was coerced into admitting the sexual abuse and that his admission was untrue. According to Stephen, the only reason he pleaded was that the law would allow him to fight and potentially regain custody of his daughter. Stephen said that he was desperate and wanted his daughter back. On the other hand, the state claimed that relationship between Stephen and Melanie lasted over 4 years. Later, Stephen would admit he did have a sexual relationship with Rhonda's teenage sister. The state presented a text message Rhonda sent to her teenage sister Melanie, who had an illicit relationship with Stephen before she and Stephen went on that fateful hike on Eagle Creek, the day she fell to her death. In the text message, Rhonda referred to Stephen as a piece of garbage and said Stephen used Melanie to hurt Rhonda. Rhonda's mother stated Rhonda knew that Stephen was trying to drive a wedge between Rhonda and Melanie. She claimed Rhonda loved her little sister and wanted to repair their relationship. According to the state, not all was well in the relationship between Rhonda and Stephen, as Stephen claimed. The court was provided with more evidence indicating that Stephen had a deviant sexual past. It was revealed that just 6 months after the mother of his daughter Rhonda passed away, Stephen was arrested and charged with 5 counts of sexual abuse for allegedly touching a 13-year-old girl. Stephen refuted these allegations, maintaining his innocence. However, he later admitted to sending a sexually suggestive text message and a picture with his shirt off to the victim. He acknowledged the inappropriate nature of his actions and pleaded guilty to 1 count of sexual harassment. At one of Stephen's preliminary hearings, the state presented the court with photos taken by Rhonda, documenting her bruised back. Rhonda's best friend said she witnessed Rhonda and Stephen fight a few times when she was on the phone with Rhonda and could hear them arguing in the background. In addition to these photos, the court also heard testimony from Stephen's ex-wife, who claimed that he had attempted to suffocate her and throw her over the railing of their 8th-floor apartment in November 2003. Stephen was not charged with any crime in China in relation to this incident, and he denied the allegations. Rhonda's family firmly believes that her boyfriend Stephen was responsible for her death. They feel he murdered her to cash in on a life insurance policy that he had taken out on her, which he had recently increased. Her mother expressed her suspicions, stating that Stephen had lost a substantial amount of money through day trading the previous year and was not financially stable. Furthermore, everyone who knew Rhonda can attest to the fact that she had a deep love for her 9-month-old daughters, and there is no way she would have taken her own life by jumping from Eagle Creek. In May 2017, Rhonda's family was shocked and horrified when they learned that the state had arranged a meeting with the defense and had come to an agreement. Stephen pleaded guilty to the lesser charge of criminally negligent homicide. Although the state believed he had murdered her, they knew the case against him was weak due to the lack of physical evidence proving he had pushed her from the trail at Eagle Creek. Stephen was given credit for the time he served while awaiting trial. However, he had to remain on parole for 3 years. Stephen had his ankle monitor removed and was released from custody. To Rhonda's family and friends, Stephen taking a plea deal was not justice. They felt that he should have faced harsher consequences for his actions. During Stephen's sentencing hearing, Rhonda's sister made an impact statement. She expressed her anger and frustration towards him and told him that he had destroyed her whole family and had caused immense pain and sorrow. Rhonda's mother also expressed her confusion and frustration, stating that she could not understand how Stephen could have taken away her daughter, leaving their family shattered. Stephen claimed that he had not pushed Rhonda but had taken the deal because time was running out for him to regain custody of his daughter. He stated that he had been willing to face the consequences of his actions for the sake of his child. However, despite Stephen's claims, Rhonda's family and friends remained unconvinced. During a 2018 interview, Stephen made a startling allegation regarding the fate of Rhonda, his war buddy. According to Stephen, on the day of her fatal fall, she was still alive when he hiked down Eagle Creek Trail and found her. The interviewer then questioned Stephen if he had put Rhonda out of her misery that day. Stephen responded by asking the interviewer a hypothetical question. If you shoot your war buddy because you see how much pain he's in, is that murder? He argued that such an act could be considered a justified homicide, although it was still a homicide. While Stephen never explicitly admitted to harming Rhonda, his comments allude to the possibility of his involvement in her death. In 2017, Rhonda's mother applied for Social Security survivor benefits on behalf of Rhonda's infant daughter. Rhonda's mother claimed that her granddaughter lived with her, and she promised to use the benefits solely for the baby's care. However, the state alleged that between April 2010 and December 2014, when Rhonda's mother claimed the little girl lived with her, she had, in fact, been living with her father, Stephen. The state charged Rhonda's mother with theft of government funds totaling nearly $40,000 over 5 years. Rhonda's mother's defense attorneys asserted that she was determined to prevent Stephen from getting custody of his and Rhonda's daughter. She didn't want Stephen to capitalize on the $1 million life insurance policy he had taken out on Rhonda's life. The defense argued that Rhonda's mother's actions were driven by her desire to protect her granddaughter and ensure she was not exploited. According to the defense, Rhonda's mother had a history of depression, which intensified after her daughter's death. In order to cope with her grief, she relied on marijuana as a means to self-medicate. The defense team contended that she used the drug as a crutch, that it clouded her judgment and impaired her ability to think clearly. The judge sentenced Rhonda's mother, at the age of 53, to 1 month in a halfway house and 3 years of probation. This sentence was imposed after the mother pleaded guilty to the theft of government funds. In addition to the jail time and probation, Rhonda's mother was also ordered to pay back the stolen benefits, amounting to $39,124. Rhonda and Stephen's daughter had been in foster care since the Department of Human Services took custody of her in October 2015. This decision was made after Stephen had pleaded guilty to sexual abuse in the case of the 13-year-old girl. As a result, an Oregon court terminated his parental rights. However, Stephen appealed this decision. Story 2. Lacey Rocha was born on May 4, 1975 to her parents, Sharon and Dennis. Her parents divorced when Lacey and her older brother Brent were still young. During this time, Lacey was introduced to her stepfather, Ron, who would play a significant role in her life. Ron, a dairy farmer, became like a father figure to Lacey and helped raise her. As a child, Lacey exuded a cheerful and outgoing personality. She was known for her infectious smile and bubbly nature, always eager to engage in conversations. Her talkative nature made her a natural attention seeker and thrived in social situations. Growing up with a stepfather who was a dairy farmer, Lacey had a close connection with the outdoors. She spent a significant amount of time exploring and enjoying the natural beauty that surrounded her. One of her favorite pastimes was gardening with her mother. This shared activity became a source of joy and fulfillment for both. Lacey's love for gardening would eventually carry over into adulthood, shaping her interest and career. Lacey attended Thomas Downey High School as a teenager and was a cheerleader. Her role as a cheerleader suited her perfectly, as it allowed her to showcase her outgoing and bubbly personality. She made a lasting impression on the school, becoming the ideal cheerleader. After graduating high school, Lacey furthered her education by attending California Polytechnic University. There, She pursued a major in ornamental horticulture. Her interest in plants and wildlife led her to specialize in this field. During her time at Cal Poly, Lacey spent a significant amount of time visiting one of her friends who worked in a restaurant in Morro Bay. It was there that she met Scott Peterson, her friend's coworker. Lacey was immediately drawn to Scott and found herself smitten by him. Determined to make the first move, Lacey decided to give Scott her phone number. Scott wasted no time in making contact with Lacey. He called Lacey, and to their surprise, they hit it off on their first conversation. After much anticipation, Scott invited Lacey out on their first date. Lacey and Scott's first date was a deep-sea fishing trip. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned for Lacey. She became seasick during the outing. Despite the disastrous start, Lacey and Scott continued to see one another. Their relationship grew more serious over time, and they decided to move in together. Before meeting Lacey, Scott had dreamed of pursuing a career as a professional golfer. However, as their relationship progressed, his priorities shifted, and he made the decision to focus on a business path. In 1997, Lacey graduated from Cal Poly. Scott graduated the following year. Their graduation marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, with their future seemingly filled with endless possibilities. On August 9, 1997, Lacey and Scott exchanged vows in San Luis Obispo County's Avila Valley. The picturesque setting at a beautiful resort provided the perfect backdrop for their special day. Surrounded by their loved ones, they celebrated their love and declared their commitment to each other. Once Lacey and Scott were married, they embarked on a new business venture by opening a sports bar called The Shack in San Luis Obispo, California. Initially, business was slow at The Shack, but over time, the couple began to see a steady increase in customers. The weekends were often packed with patrons. In 2000, after several years of successful operation, Lacey and Scott made the difficult decision to sell The Shack. While the bar had provided them with a good source of income, they decided it was time to move on and explore new opportunities. After carefully considering their options, they finalized the sale of The Shack and relocated to Lacey's hometown of Modesto, California. Lacey and Scott purchased a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in an upscale neighborhood in October 2000. After Lacey and Scott moved to Modesto, California, she took a part-time job as a substitute teacher. On the other hand, Scott was employed by a European fertilizer company branch. As a diligent and dedicated wife, Lacey dedicated her time and efforts to be the best partner possible for Scott. She excelled in cooking, cleaning, and being attentive, ensuring their home was always warm and welcoming. In 2002, the couple received exciting news. They were expecting a baby. The pregnancy due date was set for February 10, 2023. Upon learning the gender of the baby, they excitedly announced that Lacey and Scott were expecting a boy. They eventually settled on the name Connor for their little bundle of joy. On December 24, 2002, Scott claimed he left the house to fish at the Berkeley Marina at 9:30 a.m. According to Scott, Lacey had a busy day ahead of her when he left. She was watching the talk show, Martha Stewart, preparing to clean the floor, bake Christmas cookies, and take their golden retriever, Mackenzie, for a walk at the park. However, one of Lacey and Scott's neighbors discovered Mackenzie outside her home around 10:30 a.m. The neighbor then walked Mackenzie back to Lacey and Scott's house and left her in the backyard. When Scott returned home from fishing that afternoon, he claimed the house was empty. Mackenzie was in the yard, but Lacey was nowhere to be found. Her car was still parked in the driveway. Scott said that after he got home, he showered and laundered his clothes, which he said got dirty and wet from fishing. After Scott stepped out of the shower on Christmas Eve, he noticed Lacey was nowhere to be found. Growing increasingly concerned, he decided to reach out to Lacey's mother and stepfather, Sharon and Ron. Unfortunately, neither had heard from her the entire day, leaving them both worried about her safety. As time went by and Lacey remained missing, Scott and Sharon decided to report her disappearance to the police around 6 p.m. They emphasized to the police how crucial it was to find Lacey, as she was 7 months pregnant with their baby, Connor. The police were questioning Scott about what he did and where he was on the day his wife disappeared. According to Scott, he went fishing at the Berkeley Marina, located approximately 90 miles from his and Lacey's home in Modesto. However, the police would later say that from the start of their investigation, they had suspected foul play in Lacey's disappearance. Despite this, during the initial hours after Scott and Sharon filed a missing person report, the police did not treat Lacey's case as suspicious. As the search for Lacey continued, Lacey's family defended Scott. To the outside world, Scott and Lacey appeared to be an ideal couple, making it unimaginable for anyone to consider him capable of harming his pregnant wife. However, as the investigation into Lacey's disappearance progressed, the police grew increasingly suspicious of Scott. Almost a month after Lacey disappeared, the police made a shocking discovery regarding Scott Peterson. Through their investigation, they learned that he had engaged in 2 extramarital affairs and also had a long-term relationship with a woman named Amber Fry while he was married to Lacey. Amber Fry came to the police's attention when she contacted them on December 30th, 2002. She revealed that she had been having an affair with Scott after she discovered that he was a person of interest in his wife's disappearance. Amber informed the police that she had first met Scott on November 30th, 2002, and had the impression that he was single. However, just 2 weeks before Lacey disappeared, Scott told Amber that he was a widower and that this Christmas would be the first holiday season without his wife. Upon hearing this shocking information from Amber, the police began to wonder if it was an indication that Scott had already made the decision to murder his pregnant wife. In an effort to gather evidence against Scott, the police requested that she talk to him on the phone while being recorded. Their aim was to catch a potential confession on tape. The police told Lacey's family about Scott's affairs. According to Sharon, Lacey's mother, it was when the police showed her a picture of Scott and Amber together that she finally realized Scott was guilty of killing Lacey. Several days after Lacey's family learned about Scott's extramarital affairs, they announced that they would no longer support him. During the time Lacey went missing, the search for her was extensive and involved various resources. Helicopters, police on horseback, canine units, bikes, and water rescue units on rafts were all utilized to help locate the missing pregnant woman. The involvement of not only the police, but also Lacey's loved ones and many volunteers made the search for her even more comprehensive. Over 900 people showed up during the first 2 days to assist in the search. At a press conference, one of the police officers working on Lacey's case expressed doubts that Lacey had left her house on December 24, 2002, of her own free will. Lacey's disappearance became a media sensation, and the story of a beautiful, devoted wife and daughter missing from her home on Christmas Eve was captivating for tabloids. The spotlight on Lacey's case intensified as the public sought answers and speculated about her disappearance. After Lacey Peterson went missing on December 24, 2002, a reward of $25,000 was initially offered for any information leading to her safe return. However, as time went on with no leads, the amount was increased to $500,000. In an effort to raise awareness and gather information, posters of Lacey were prominently displayed in Modesto, California. One of Lacey's friend's husbands created a website to help spread the news. Several months after Lacey Peterson disappeared, a couple walking their dog on April 13, 2003, came across a horrifying discovery in a marshy area of the San Francisco Bay at Richmond's Point Isabel Regional Shoreline Park. They discovered the decomposing body of a male infant. The following day, another person found the body of a pregnant woman on the shore of the east side of the bay shore. This area was approximately 1 mile away from where the baby was found. On April 18, 2003, DNA tests confirmed that the bodies discovered were indeed Lacey and her unborn son, Connor. Lacey and Connor were buried at Burwood Cemetery. The Associated Press would later reveal that during the autopsy, the medical examiner found 1.5 loops of nylon tape around the baby's neck, and a significant cut was on his body. According to the medical examiner, Lacey had 2 cracked ribs. Her upper torso had been emptied of internal organs, and she was missing her head and limbs. During the autopsy, the medical examiner determined the baby died in utero and was expelled from Lacey's body after she died. Agents from the FBI and officers with the Modesto Police Department conducted a search at the residence of Scott and Lacey, seeking any evidence of their involvement in Lacey's disappearance. This search revealed several intriguing clues, including a piece of hair found in Scott's pliers that he kept on his fishing boat. The FBI obtained a DNA sample from the hair and conducted further analysis. Lacey was found to be a match. In addition to the search at their home, the FBI also thoroughly examined Scott's truck and warehouse. They sought any potential evidence linking Scott to Lacey's disappearance. Furthermore, the FBI searched Scott's boat, where they discovered a homemade anchor. According to Scott, the anchor was made using a 90-pound bag of concrete, which he used to repair his driveway. However, the state believed that Scott had made 5 anchors and had used 4 of them to sink Lacey's body in San Francisco Bay. The bodies discovered in the San Francisco Bay were later identified as Lacey and Connor. This tragic discovery prompted the police to arrest Scott near the golf course. What raised eyebrows was the noticeable change in Scott's appearance when he was arrested. His normally dark brown hair was now blonde. Furthermore, Scott's vehicle was packed with items. The items found were $15,000 in cash, survival gear, and camping equipment. Additionally, the police discovered 4 cell phones and 2 driver's licenses. One license belonged to Scott, while the other was linked to his brother. This evidence suggests to the police that Scott was attempting to flee the state. However, Scott's father offered a different explanation for the driver's license. According to him, Scott had borrowed his brother's license in order to get a discount at the golf course. As for the reason Scott's vehicle was packed to the brim, his father claimed it was due to the media. Scott was reportedly living out of his car at the time to avoid the reporters camped outside his house. Scott's trial began 1 year after his arrest in June 2004. During the opening arguments, the state presented its case to the jury, asserting that they knew Scott had killed Lacey due to his affair with Amber Frey. The state emphasized Scott's behavior in the days before and after Lacey was reported missing, highlighting inconsistencies in his statement to police. On the day Lacey was reported missing, Scott initially told police that he had been fishing, but later told people that he had been golfing. Additionally, the state pointed to Scott's request to the police if they had used cadaver dogs to investigate a park where Lacey was supposed to walk their dog. The implication of this request was that Scott was already aware of the potential crime scene and was trying to cover his tracks. Scott's defense attorneys made a compelling argument in court during their opening statements. His attorney argued that just because Scott had a track record of cheating on his wife did not automatically make him guilty of her murder. They asserted that Scott would not sacrifice his entire life for someone with whom he had only 4 dates. Additionally, the defense put forth the notion that Lacey's hair could have been found in Scott's boat due to a previous visit to the marina with Scott. During Scott's trial, 2 relatives of Lacey's testified and said that Scott did not show any emotion during the time his pregnant wife was missing. A realtor also testified that Scott approached her in January, 1 month after Lacey disappeared, trying to sell the couple's home. Additionally, a salesman testified that Scott traded in Lacey's car after she went missing. To the state, all of this was evidence of Scott's guilt. Amber Frey took the witness stand and spoke to the court about her affair with Scott. The jury heard the secretly recorded telephone calls between Amber and Scott, including one recorded after Lacey disappeared, in which Scott falsely claimed that he was in Paris when he was actually attending a vigil for his missing wife. During the trial, a hydrologist and an expert on tides of the San Francisco Bay testified that Lacey's body could have been dumped in the area where Scott told police he was fishing on the day Lacey disappeared. The defense in Scott's murder case argued that there was a lack of credible evidence linking him to the crime. They contended that someone had kidnapped Lacey on Christmas Eve 2002 and held her captive until she gave birth to Connor. Afterward, the killer disposed of both bodies in the San Francisco Bay. His attorney argued that there was no evidence to connect Scott to the crime directly, and that other potential suspects could have been responsible. During Scott's trial, a juror was removed and replaced with an alternate juror due to misconduct. The dismissed juror had conducted independent research on the case, which is a violation of legal procedures. In addition to the juror being removed, the foreman also asked to be removed from the case. His request was taken seriously, and it was decided that his removal was necessary to maintain a fair and just trial. On November 12, 2004, a jury in California convicted Scott of 2 counts of murder. The charges were first-degree murder for the killing of his wife Lacey and second-degree murder for the killing of their unborn son Connor. Lacey's murder, in particular, was classified as first-degree murder with special circumstances due to the involvement of the fetus. This classification meant that Scott faced the possibility of the death penalty. After Scott was convicted of the murders, the penalty phase of his trial began. This phase of the trial focused on determining the appropriate punishment for the crimes. During this phase, the jury was required to consider various factors, including Scott's criminal history, aggravating circumstances, and mitigating circumstances. The jury unanimously decided that Scott should be sentenced to death. Following the jury verdict, the judge reviewed the evidence and affirmed the jury's decision. He determined that Lacey's murder was cruel, uncaring, heartless, and callous. Because Scott was on death row, his sentence was automatically appealed. Consequently, his case was heard by the California Supreme Court in June 2020. Scott's defense attorneys presented several arguments during the appeal. They argued that the prospective jurors were improperly excused, that the trial judge improperly allowed 2 jurors onto Scott's boat, and that the motion to move the trial to another county should have been granted due to juror questionnaire results, showing almost half of the prospective jurors had already concluded Scott was guilty prior to the trial. However, the state asserted that there was no evidence that a juror was improperly dismissed, and no credible claim that any of the 12 jurors who decided Scott's fate were impartial. In August 2020, the United States Supreme Court upheld the conviction of death row inmate Scott, but overturned his death sentence. The following year, the judge ordered Scott to be resentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. As a result of this decision, Scott was transferred from San Quentin State Prison, where he had been on death row, to Mule Creek State Prison in Ione, California. This transfer was in accordance with the judge's order. On April 1, 2004, President George W. Bush signed the Unborn Victims of Violence Act into law. During the signing ceremony, Lacey's mother and stepfather were present, standing alongside President Bush, as they witnessed the legislation being put into effect. This legislation, also known as Lacey and Connor's Law, aimed to provide legal protection for unborn children in cases of violence committed against their mothers. The UVVA recognized that an unborn child has a separate legal existence from his or her mother, making it a crime to harm or kill the unborn child while committing a crime against a pregnant woman. It recognized that an unborn child should be considered a victim of violence, deserving of the same rights and protections as any other person. Story 3. Mary Catherine Higdon was born in 1994 and was a happy child who was always running around, laughing and having a good time. She was known for her sense of humor and would often bring laughter to the room with her witty remarks and impersonations. One of her favorite pastimes was walking around town with her pet frog, which she would proudly parade on a shoestring. Her love for nature and animals was evident from an early age, and she spent countless hours exploring the outdoors and observing the beauty of nature. In addition to being entertaining, Mary had a passion for performing. She often put on plays for her family, captivating everyone with her creativity and imagination. Her family thought Mary was so talented and had a bright future. Growing up, Mary was exposed to guns and became a passionate enthusiast. She learned to respect and handle firearms responsibly, appreciating their power and potential. Mary's love for guns grew as she honed her skills and became a skilled marksman. While in high school, Mary Catherine met the love of her life, Stephen Freeman. Stephen was born on January 1, 1995 in Griffin, Georgia, and was raised alongside his parents and brother. Growing up, Stephen was close with his family and described as a happy child with many friends. His friends described Stephen as a laid-back and chill guy who was always kind and helpful. They said that he truly loved and cared for everyone around him. One of Stephen's favorite things to do was to spend time outdoors in nature. Even though Stephen was close with his parents, he shared an especially strong bond with his mother. When Stephen's mother graduated college after returning to school as an adult, he wrote her a heartfelt letter expressing his admiration for her accomplishments. In the letter, Stephen wrote how he looked up to her every day and loved her to the moon and back. Stephen acknowledged the hard work and determination she had demonstrated during her 2 years working towards her degree. His admiration for his mother was evident in his words, and he expressed his gratitude for the role she played in his life. After meeting in high school, Mary Catherine and Stephen quickly formed a deep connection and were inseparable. What brought them together was their shared love of the outdoors. Whether hiking, camping, fishing, or hunting, the two of them thoroughly enjoyed spending time in nature. Mary Catherine and Stephen's love for the outdoors served as the foundation of their strong relationship. Eventually, Mary Catherine and Stephen graduated from high school, marking the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. As high school sweethearts, they decided to embark on the next phase of their relationship by moving together in a house in Griffin, Georgia. Mary Catherine and Stephen were thrilled about living in their own space. Stephen's mother looked at Mary Catherine as more than just her son's girlfriend. She genuinely regarded her as a daughter and embraced her into their family with open arms. Mary Catherine and Stephen visited Stephen's parents' house every Sunday to have a big family dinner. This tradition brought everyone closer and solidified Mary Catherine's place within the family. Furthermore, Stephen's friends also began to warm up to Mary Catherine. Initially, they were hesitant about the couple's relationship, but as they spent more time together, they couldn't help but notice how well-suited they were. They appreciated how Mary Catherine brought happiness and joy into Stephen's life and admired her love for the outdoors. Stephen worked as a metalworker and repaired roofs, while Mary Catherine was a part-time teacher's assistant at a preschool, St. George's Episcopal School, in Milner, Georgia. In addition to working at the school, Mary Catherine was employed at a sporting goods store where she sold guns. One of Stephen's best friends, Thomas Skinner, worked with Mary Catherine at the sporting goods shop. While working at the sporting goods store, Mary Catherine had the opportunity to learn about basic gun safety. This information included learning to hold, load, and shoot a gun. Like Mary Catherine, Stephen loved firearms. Stephen owned several shotguns and rifles, which he enjoyed using for hunting and target practice. He also kept a Glock 42 in the home for protection. By the summer of 2018, Mary Catherine and Stephen had been together for 7 years and were still living in their apartment in Griffin, Georgia. However, their high school sweethearts happily ever after came to an end on the night of August 1st, when Mary Catherine made a harrowing phone call to 911. When the dispatcher answered, Mary Catherine screamed, "I accidentally just shot my boyfriend." Within minutes, the police arrived at Mary Catherine and Stephen's apartment and found Mary Catherine a wreck. Mary Catherine, in a state of hysteria, was crying and hyperventilating as she knelt over Stephen's lifeless body. She screamed, "I cannot lose him. I cannot lose him," over and over again, her voice filled with anguish and despair. As the police gently guided Mary Catherine away from Stephen's body, they were able to get a better look at his condition. They discovered that he had been shot in the chest, but thankfully he was still alive. In a desperate effort to save his life, an ambulance was called to transport Stephen to the nearest hospital. Upon arrival at the emergency room, skilled doctors began administering life-saving measures. However, despite the best efforts of the medical staff, Stephen's condition continued to deteriorate. The severity of his injury proved impossible, and he ultimately passed away due to the injuries sustained. Mary Catherine went with the police to the police department for a formal interview after Stephen was transported to the hospital. She started by explaining the events of the night that ended in her shooting Stephen accidentally. According to Mary Catherine, she was handing Stephen the gun because he usually put it on the side of his bed at night for safety. However, Mary Catherine stated that they never kept a bullet in the chamber of the guns in the house. During Mary Catherine's interview, the police were sure they smelt alcohol on her breath. As the police continued to question Mary Catherine, her story about her shooting Stephen changed. Instead of handing the gun to Stephen, she now said that she tossed the firearm to him. The police officers interviewing Mary Catherine were suspicious of her story. They knew that a gun would not randomly go off by being tossed, and someone needed to pull the trigger. Additionally, the sight of Stephen's gunshot wound led them to believe that Mary Catherine must have been directly pointing the gun at him for the bullet to strike where it did. Eventually, during her interview, Mary Catherine said, "I did it out of anger." However, even though the police were recording the interview with Mary Catherine, there was nothing but feedback during the part when she said she shot Stephen out of anger. Still, even without that key piece of the recording, the police felt they had found enough forensic evidence to convince them Mary Catherine intentionally shot her boyfriend Stephen. At Mary Catherine and Stephen's apartment, the police found evidence that indicated there had been a heated argument between the couple before Stephen was shot. Scattered food throughout the house clearly showed that an altercation had occurred. Additionally, it was discovered that officers had been called to Mary Catherine and Stephen's house 5 times within the last year due to domestic disputes. Furthermore, the police found evidence proving that the gun used to shoot Stephen was loaded on the night of the incident. Despite Mary Catherine's claims to the contrary, the police discovered traces of cooking grease on both the gun and the magazine. This discovery led the police to the conclusion that Mary Catherine, who was preparing dinner at the time, had loaded the weapon. After Mary Catherine shot Stephen, the police conducted interviews with his friends to gather information about their relationship. Stephen's friends stated that the relationship between Mary Catherine and him was characterized by toxicity and constant arguing. They revealed that the couple often engaged in heated confrontations. Stephen's friends described Mary Catherine as possessive and verbally abusive towards him. They said that she exhibited signs of mental instability, which amplified the tension in their relationship. Whenever Stephen left their apartment to seek space away from Mary Catherine, she would relentlessly text and call him, to the point he had to block her. One of the friends disclosed that Stephen confided in him that Mary Catherine had pulled a firearm on him at least 3 times in the past. However, Stephen refrained from reporting these incidents to the police, fearing that Mary Catherine would get in trouble. Stephen's friend emphasized that Stephen's primary concern was ensuring Mary Catherine's well-being, even in the face of his safety. When Stephen's friends heard that Mary Catherine accidentally shot Stephen, they found that hard to believe because they knew she had extensive knowledge on how to handle a firearm. 3 months before Mary Catherine shot Stephen texted a friend saying that Mary Catherine was running around outside, screaming at the top of her lungs and attempting to shoot him and herself. The following month, Stephen informed another friend that although Mary Catherine had pointed a gun at him in the past, the most recent time, she had a look in her eyes that made him fear that she would actually go through with it. Stephen's friends reported to the police that by July 2018, he was tired of Mary Catherine's behavior and had been contemplating leaving her after 7 years. His plan was to move to a different town while she was out one day without informing her. He feared what might happen if she knew he was leaving her. Police discovered a series of text messages from July 30th, 2018, 2 days before Mary Catherine fatally shot Stephen. The first text message sent by Stephen to Mary Catherine on July 30th read, "Good morning, beautiful, don't forget." Mary Catherine responded by saying, "Have a great day." Stephen then replied, "You too, love you." However, the police also discovered that the following night, July 31st, Stephen spent the evening at a friend's house and did not return Mary Catherine's texts or calls because the couple was fighting. On the night of the shooting, August 1st, Mary Catherine was at home preparing dinner, but Stephen was not there. She reached out to Stephen's mother, who informed her that Stephen was with his friend. Angry at Stephen, Mary Catherine started driving to his friend's. She knew where he was, and she wanted to confront him. As she drove, she spotted Stephen sitting in the passenger seat of his friend's truck. Mary Catherine pulled alongside Stephen's friend and started to yell at Stephen. Stephen tried calming Mary Catherine down, assuring her he was on his way home. Even though Stephen's friend said Mary Catherine had pointed a gun at him on several occasions, Mary Catherine adamantly denied these allegations. She insisted that she never pulled a gun on Stephen. However, Mary Catherine did admit to having threatened to take her own life a few times with a gun. Stephen's mother later shared her thoughts in an interview, explaining that she believes one of the main reasons why Stephen stayed with Mary Catherine for so long was because she was constantly threatening to take her life. He was terrified that she might follow through on these threats if he left Mary Catherine. According to Mary Catherine, on the night of the incident that led to Stephen's shooting, it was Stephen who escalated the situation and became violent. She claimed that he threw the dinner she had prepared with so much effort in her face. Mary Catherine stated that she only picked up the gun as a means of self-defense and scared Stephen away, as she wanted him to leave the apartment. However, she claimed that Stephen lunged at her, which frightened her. And as she backed away, the next thing she knew, Stephen was bleeding from the chest. At the time of Stephen's shooting, Mary Catherine claimed she did not disclose this version of events to the police because she was embarrassed to admit that Stephen had a history of violence toward her. Mary Catherine claimed Stephen had hit her in the past and was controlling. She said he once kicked her out of bed with such force she struck her head on the doorframe. However, Stephen's friends had a different opinion on Mary Catherine and Stephen's relationship. They claimed they witnessed Mary Catherine hitting Stephen, saying she slapped him hard in the face. On the other hand, Mary Catherine's sister had a different opinion on their relationship. She said she saw bruises on Mary Catherine's arm 2 weeks before Stephen was shot. According to Mary Catherine's sister, she pulled Mary Catherine aside and asked her what happened, and Mary Catherine said that Stephen had grabbed her. After the police concluded Stephen's death was a murder, they charged Mary Catherine with murder, aggravated assault, and possession of a firearm during the commission of a felony. The state offered Mary Catherine a plea deal, stating that if she pleaded guilty, she would receive a life prison sentence with the possibility of parole. However, despite the appeal of this deal, Mary Catherine ultimately turned down the offer and decided to go to trial, where she would plead her innocence. She pleaded not guilty to the charges against her, arguing that she shot Stephen in self-defense. On June 17, 2019, almost 1 year after Stephen's death, Mary Catherine went on trial for shooting him. The trial brought attention to a tumultuous relationship between Mary Catherine and Stephen. Mary Catherine's attorneys argued that she acted in self-defense, claiming that she was genuinely afraid of Stephen due to his history of violence and abuse. To strengthen their case, they presented evidence to the jury that highlighted Stephen's controlling, manipulative, and dangerous behavior. During the trial, Mary Catherine took the witness stand in her own defense. In her emotional testimony, Mary Catherine opened up about the constant abuse she suffered at the hands of Stephen. She described a pervasive pattern of abuse that spanned multiple forms, including physical, mental, emotional, verbal, and sexual. Mary Catherine testified that Stephen would hit her, verbally humiliate her, and subject her to degrading treatment whenever the opportunity presented itself. According to Mary Catherine, Stephen subjected her to every type of abuse he could. She shared incidents where Stephen would smack her around and verbally abuse her, telling her to do better and be better. The physical and emotional toll of the abuse had left her feeling trapped and fearful for her life. Mary Catherine believed that Stephen's actions constantly threatened her well-being and safety. Mary Catherine's defense presented evidence in the form of a text message Stephen sent to Mary Catherine in which he wrote, "You're going to get punished when I get home." When her attorneys asked what Stephen meant by punishing Mary, Catherine said Stephen would smack her around and tell her to do better and be a better girlfriend to him. Breaking down in tears on the witness stand, Mary Catherine said if she tried to defend her, Stephen would hit her harder. Her defense showed another text to the court in which Stephen told Mary Catherine, "Don't hit me because if you hit me, then I'm just going to hit you back 2 times harder." During her testimony, Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen had a red room, which she described as similar to the room depicted in the popular book series, 50 Shades of Grey. In the red room, she alleges that the two engaged in aggressive and sometimes violent intercourse. To support her claim, her defense attorneys presented the court with a text message from Stephen to Mary Catherine, in which he wrote, "I miss you too much. I'm coming home and you're about to get it bad. You're going to the red room." Mary Catherine also testified that Stephen sexually assaulted her on 2 occasions. One of these incidents occurred after they returned from a vacation to Walt Disney World. According to Mary Catherine, their intercourse was becoming more aggressive and she expressed her discomfort to Stephen, asking him to stop. However, Stephen allegedly intensified his efforts instead of heeding her pleas, stating that she had received various gifts at Disney World and now owed him what was rightfully his. He reportedly told her that she was going to give him what he wanted and what he deserved. The defense presented additional evidence in the form of text messages from Stephen to support Mary Catherine's claims of abuse. These messages were not only vulgar and threatening, but also demonstrated a pattern of verbal assaults directed towards Mary Catherine. They had over 60 pages of text messages from Stephen that showcased his abusive behavior. One particular message sent while Stephen was out with a group of friends was particularly disturbing. In the image, Stephen was seen holding a large dead fish aloft, accompanied by a caption that read, "This is you, bitch." Another message presented to the court was one from Stephen after Mary Catherine cheated on him. Stephen wrote he was going to wreck her for wrecking him. Furthermore, the defense alleged that Stephen had a drug and alcohol addiction, which contributed to his violent outbursts. During the conversation regarding the night she shot Mary Catherine, she insisted that she was the one who ended her relationship with Stephen, rather than the other way around. Mary Catherine claimed that Stephen did not take the news well and behaved as if he intended to attack her. Terrified, she said that she resorted to grabbing the gun in self-defense. According to Mary Catherine, the final words she exchanged with Stephen before she fired the weapon were, "Get out of my house." Stephen's friends and family did not believe Mary Catherine's allegations that he was a violent, dangerous, abusive man. They knew Stephen as a laid-back, friendly, caring person. His mother said she had no idea Stephen was sending Mary Catherine disturbing text messages or threatening her violence, and did not condone it. However, Stephen's mother claimed she thought Stephen only said all of the things he did out of anger. However, during cross-examination, the state confronted Mary Catherine with the fact that she had never reported the alleged abuse Stephen had subjected her to. The state also argued that hours before Stephen was shot, Mary Catherine was searching violent, sexually explicit images on the internet while she was babysitting. Mary Catherine claimed she was only looking at those sites to get ideas to make Stephen happy, hoping it would convince him to stay with her. Additionally, the state told the court that Mary Catherine had altered her story about the night he shot Stephen at least 10 times since her initial interview a year before trial. One of the key pieces of evidence presented in court to support the state's theory that Mary Catherine intentionally shot Stephen was a text Stephen sent her that read, "I know you've pointed a gun at me multiple times already, but last time scared the shit out of me." Furthermore, Stephen's friends also took the witness stand to testify about witnessing the abuse Mary Catherine inflicted on him. Their accounts corroborated the state's argument that Mary Catherine had a history of violence towards Stephen, not the other way around. After the jury deliberated for 4 hours, they returned with a verdict of not guilty of malice murder, felony murder, as well as the lesser charges of assault and possession of a firearm in the commission of a felony. Mary Catherine was then released from prison. The verdict surprised everyone who knew and loved Stephen as they were shocked by the decision. Members of the jury later admitted that they all actually believed that Mary Catherine purposely shot and killed Stephen. However, they recognized that there was not enough evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt why she shot Stephen. This lack of evidence made it difficult to establish whether it was indeed murder or if it was justified as self-defense. Moreover, the jury was unable to reach a consensus on the validity of all the accusations against either Stephen or Mary Catherine. Story 4. In the late 1980s, Mark Winger found himself on a blind date with a coworker of his brother. Her name was Donna. Donna worked as a hospital tech, and Mark was a well-respected nuclear engineer. As they embarked on their blind date, Mark and Donna quickly discovered that they hit it off. It wasn't long before they became an official couple. After 6 months of dating, Mark decided to propose to Donna, and she happily accepted. On March 4, 1989, Mark and Donna tied the knot in a grand wedding ceremony in Hollywood, Florida. The newlyweds celebrated their love and union in front of their friends and family. Following the ceremony, Mark and Donna stayed in Florida, where they enjoyed their time as newlyweds. However, after a few years, they decided to move to Springfield, Illinois. In Springfield, Mark and Donna built a new life together. They settled down and focused on their career and family. Donna and Mark were deeply committed to having children, and were devastated when they discovered that Donna was unable to have them. Mark's dream of having a big family was shattered, and he found it difficult to accept. However, 6 years into their marriage, things took a surprising turn. In June 1995, while Donna was working in the operating room, a doctor approached her with a life-changing proposition. The doctor informed Donna that he had encountered a teenage mother who wanted to adopt her baby. He said the mother asked if he knew of anyone who would be a suitable candidate for adoption. And without hesitation, the doctor's mind immediately went to Donna and Mark. When Donna went home and shared the doctor's suggestion with Mark, they immediately knew they wanted to adopt the baby. The decision was not made lightly, as they recognized the immense responsibility and challenges that come with adoption. However, their love for children and desire to provide a loving home for a child in need outweighed any hesitations. Donna and Mark brought their newborn baby girl Bailey home from the hospital, and from the moment she arrived, Donna and the baby formed a strong bond. It was evident from the beginning that Donna's maternal instincts were in full swing, and she seemed to thrive as a mother. On the other hand, Mark was full of excitement and anticipation as he prepared for his new role as a father. Together, the Winger family appeared picture-perfect, resembling an all-American family with their loving and nurturing bond. To support Donna in her new role as a mother, her close friend Deanne Schultz regularly stopped by to offer her assistance. Deanne, whom Donna had befriended while working at the hospital, proved to be an invaluable source of support and guidance. She would often lend a hand in caring for Bailey, allowing Donna to take a much-needed break. In the summer of 1996, Donna and baby Bailey embarked on a journey to Florida to visit Donna's parents. Donna was eager to showcase her daughter and introduce her to her side of the family. To ensure a smooth journey, Donna's parents arranged to have a driver pick her up from the airport after her trip and take her back home. This arrangement was made to allow Donna to fully focus on Bailey and not have to worry about the 2-hour drive. As they embarked on the journey home, the driver began a conversation with Donna. In his confession, the driver revealed that he had been hearing a voice in his head that kept saying bad things. However, more recently, he claimed that the voice was telling him to hurt people by setting up a car bomb. Donna was alarmed by this revelation and found herself questioning the driver's sanity. Furthermore, the driver disclosed that he had a penchant for older women. He also revealed that he would host raunchy parties and invite Donna to join him. These revelations further raised alarm bells for Donna as she became increasingly concerned about the man's intentions. As the drive continued, the driver's behavior became increasingly erratic. He frequently switched lanes and accelerated at unexpected speeds. Throughout the ride home, Donna's mind raced with thoughts of the driver's alarming revelations and unsettling behavior. She couldn't help but wonder if she should trust the man behind the wheel with her and Bailey's safety. The journey home became an even more nerve-wracking experience, with Donna constantly on guard and praying for a safe return home. When Donna got home with Bailey, she was relieved. However, the experience had left her shaken. She called her sister, who offered her reassurance and told her to forget about the traumatic car ride. Despite the reassurance, Donna couldn't shake the feeling of unease. She began receiving strange phone calls, and suspecting that the caller was the driver, Mark called the car company and filed a complaint. As a result, the driver, Roger Harrington, was suspended from his job. Mark had Donna write down what happened, ensuring they had documentation if needed. On August 29, 1996, Mark Winger placed a call to 911, frantically reporting that a man had entered his home and begun assaulting his wife, Donna. In his distressed state, Mark exclaimed that Donna's brains were scattered everywhere. He informed the dispatcher that he had shot the attacker in self-defense. Within minutes, the Springfield Police Department arrived at Donna and Mark Winger's residence. Upon entering through the front door, the officers observed 2 bodies lying on the floor. Although Donna was still alive, she barely clung to life. She had been brutally struck at least 7 times in the head, causing severe injuries. Beside Donna's body, the officers discovered another man lying motionless. Upon closer examination, they found that the man had a faint pulse and had suffered 2 gunshot wounds to the head. Further investigation revealed that the man's driver's license identified him as Roger Harrington. As Donna and Roger Harrington were taken to the hospital by ambulance, the police arrived at the scene to investigate. Upon examining the area, they discovered a hammer covered in blood and a .45 caliber semi-automatic handgun. Furthermore, on the kitchen table, the police noticed a yellow coffee mug and a pack of cigarettes. Outside the victim's home, the police observed Roger Harrington's car parked in the opposite direction. Inside Roger's vehicle, the police discovered a note which read, Mark Winger, 4:30 p.m. The letter included Donna and Mark's address. A homicide detective arrived at the scene and met with Mark Winger in the master bedroom of his house. Mark was visibly upset and emotional, continuously asking who the attacker was. While the detective knew that the person responsible was Roger Harrington, he decided to withhold this information for the time being. Mark eventually calmed down enough to tell the detective what had happened. According to Mark, he was working out on his treadmill in the basement when he heard a loud commotion. Concerned, he went to investigate and saw something that seemed off. Mark peered into the master bedroom and discovered that their daughter, Bailey, was lying unattended on the bed. Bailey being alone raised his suspicions as he knew that his wife, Donna, would never leave their child unattended. Continuing his investigation, Mark heard noises coming from the direction of the kitchen. Determined to protect his family, Mark retrieved his gun from the nightstand and walked down the hallway. What he found was a terrifying sight: a strange man attacking Donna with a hammer. The man looked up, made eye contact with Mark, and continued striking Donna with the hammer. Mark, in response, took matters into his own hands and shot the man in self-defense. Although the man fell backward after being shot, the man managed to get back up. This movement caught Mark off guard, and he decided to take action once again. He fired another shot at the man. After the incident, Mark had a conversation with the detective in which he sought clarification on the identity of the man who had been beating Donna. The detective confirmed that the man was indeed Roger Harrington. Upon hearing the detective's confirmation, Mark expressed his shock and disbelief. He exclaimed, "Oh my God, that's the man who had been harassing my wife." As the detective searched Mark and Donna's home, he discovered a note written by Donna describing her terrifying drive home from the airport with Roger Harrington. The detective was already familiar with Roger Harrington, who owned a trailer park in the town. Roger and his wife resided there and often encountered domestic disputes. It made sense to the detective that Roger, enraged after losing his job, would retaliate by returning to Donna and Mark's home and causing violence. The detective reasoned that Mark, in the face of danger, would ultimately have no choice but to shoot Roger in self-defense. After conducting a thorough examination of the scene of the crime and hearing Mark's explanation, the police concluded that the shooting was an act of self-defense. As a result, the case was closed and Mark was exonerated. After Donna's funeral, her mother and sister stayed behind in Illinois to help take care of her newborn baby, Bailey. During that time, they noticed Mark acting strangely. He was consuming excessive amounts of alcohol and immersing himself in violent and disturbing movies, despite having recently undergone a traumatic event. By December 1995, Donna's family could no longer sustain the demands of traveling back and forth between their homes to assist Mark with caring for the baby. As a result, they proposed to Mark that he hire a nanny. Mark eventually agreed to the idea and hired a woman named Rebecca, who stood out due to her stunning appearance and kind demeanor. Rebecca was a tall, blonde woman who exuded warmth and compassion. She eagerly took on the responsibility of caring for Bailey and promptly began removing all the items the infant required. Donna's family felt reassured by Rebecca's presence, knowing their baby was in good hands. After showing Rebecca the ropes, Donna's family decided to return home, content that Bailey was being well taken care of by Rebecca. Rebecca and baby Bailey formed a strong bond rather quickly. There were nights when Rebecca and Mark would stay up late, drinking wine and engaging in deep conversations. However, there was one issue that arose. Donna's best friend, Dean Schultz, expressed a strong desire to be a part of Bailey's life. However, Rebecca felt uncomfortable when Deanne seemed to push excessively to be involved in their child's life. Rebecca believed that Deanne was attempting to take over Donna's role. When Rebecca mentioned Deanne's strange behavior to Mark, he explained that Deanne was still grieving the loss of Donna. He said Deanne's actions were driven by a deep sense of loss and a desire to fill the void left behind by her friend's death. Mark believed Deanne's intentions were good, but she was still struggling to come to terms with the tragedy that had unfolded. Mark filed a lawsuit against the BART Transportation Company, alleging that the company was liable for the murder of Donna. The lawsuit was filed under a claim of wrongful death, seeking justice and compensation for the loss of Donna. In January 1996, Mark contacted the detective working on Donna's case and asked about its status. Mark specifically inquired about the possibility of retrieving his gun, which he had recently surrendered to the authorities. However, sensing something off about Mark, the detective felt uneasy during their conversation. There were certain aspects of the crime scene that raised doubts in the detective's mind about the true nature of events that led to Donna's death. Mark and Rebecca's relationship took a romantic turn, and they began dating. When Mark met Rebecca's brother, he decided to share a story about a tragic incident involving the murder of his wife, Donna. However, as Mark relayed the story, Rebecca's brother became uncomfortable. Mark's account of the murder seemed to focus more on his abilities and achievements rather than the tragic loss of Donna. Instead of conveying a sense of sorrow and empathy, Mark boasted about his heroic actions and how he saved the day with his gun. Rebecca's brother thought this strange, as it was not the appropriate time to boast about ego and achievements while discussing such a horrific event. It seemed to Rebecca's brother that Mark was primarily interested in promoting himself and capitalizing on Donna's death, rather than honoring her memory and reflecting on the impact of the tragedy. Shortly after Rebecca and Mark started dating, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant. This news was met with joy and excitement from both Rebecca and Mark, as they were thrilled to welcome another baby into the world. Mark was determined to show Rebecca how serious he was about their relationship and marriage, and he decided to take action. Mark, who was Jewish, knew that this decision would significantly impact both their lives. However, he decided it was important to convert to Christianity to demonstrate his commitment to Rebecca and their future family. Mark believed that embracing a new religion would show his willingness to make sacrifices for their relationship. 14 months after Donna's murder, Rebecca and Mark decided to elope in Hawaii. They decided to keep the news a secret, not wanting to burden their loved ones with the additional stress of a wedding so soon after the tragic death of Donna. This decision hurt Donna's family deeply, as they couldn't believe that Mark could have replaced Donna so quickly. In December 1996, Mark sold his and Danaha's house and built a new home for himself and Rebecca in the country. They purchased a piece of land with a pond in the backyard, which became a special place for the family to play and enjoy time together. Mark would often go fishing in the pond while the rest of the family enjoyed spending time together. Over the years, Mark and Rebecca went on to expand their family, welcoming 3 children together. However, as time went on, the couple started to pull away from Donna's family. This separation was difficult for Danaha's mother and sisters. On one occasion, Danaha's parents decided to visit Mark in their new home. While they were visiting, they wanted to present Bailey with a necklace that had belonged to Donna. They put the necklace around Bailey's neck. However, Mark denied the request, insisting they remove the necklace from the baby. This incident further strained the relationship between the families. In their attempts to reconcile, Danaha's parents reached out to Mark in a letter, expressing their concerns and desire for reunification. However, Mark responded with a letter stating that Bailey could no longer refer to Danaha's mother as grandma. Despite the strained relationship, Donna's family continued to show their love for Bailey by sending her a card every year for her birthday. Deanne Schultz, Donna's best friend, revealed to the police in February 1999 a secret she had been keeping. She confessed that she had been having an affair with her close friend Donna's husband, Mark, prior to Donna's murder. According to Deanne, Mark had made incriminating statements indicating that it would be more convenient for both of them if Donna were to pass away. However, Deanne rejected participating in Mark's plan, stating that she refused to have anything to do with the murder. On the day of Donna's murder, Mark contacted Deanne and asked, "Would you still love me when I have done something wrong?" Deanne replied, "Yes, I would." After Donna was murdered, Deanne and Mark continued their affair for about 6 months after Donna's death. However, they eventually broke up when Mark started dating Rebecca. After the murder and the life changes that occurred, Deanne experienced a difficult time. She attempted to take her own life on several occasions, struggling to cope with the aftermath of what had happened. Her life was turned upside down, and she struggled with the weight of her secret and Donna's murder. The detective was reviewing the evidence in Donna's murder case, as he had suspicions about Mark. However, he could not locate the box containing evidence related to Donna's case. The detective eventually discovered that the evidence had been released to Mark's attorney as part of a civil lawsuit against BART Transportation for wrongful death. When the detective finally obtained the evidence, he noticed several suspicious things. Firstly, there was no forced entry into the house, which raised questions about Roger Harrington's involvement. Why was a yellow coffee mug belonging to Roger found in Donna's home? If Roger intended to kill Donna, why would he bring that inside? Additionally, Roger's cigarettes were on the kitchen table, raising questions about why he would bring those into her home. Furthermore, the detective observed that the items found in Roger's car could be potential weapons. He had items such as a tire iron wrapped in tape and a knife, which could have been used to harm Donna and Mark. However, if Roger had intended to commit murder, it raises questions as to why he would choose to enter the home and use a hammer that was on the kitchen table instead of utilizing the weapons he had in his car. After Donna's murder, Roger's family insisted that Roger was not a troublemaker and that he was a good person. The detective began to explore the possibility that Mark had the motive to eliminate Donna. And when Donna came home with the story of the erratic car service driver, Mark saw an opportunity. Evidence gathered in the case included 3 Polaroid pictures. One of the initial officers who arrived at the scene had a camera in his possession. He took photos of the scene that depicted the positions of Donna and Roger's bodies before they were taken to the hospital. The detective was unaware that these pictures existed. The positions of Donna and Roger's bodies in the photos did not align with Mark's versions of events. Mark claimed that he shot Roger, and the latter fell back with his feet remaining near Donna's head. However, the photos showed Roger's head in the same position as Donna. This discrepancy raised suspicions and cast doubt on Mark's version of events. In September 1999, a detective approached Donna's mother and informed her of their suspicions that Mark was responsible for her daughter's murder. Donna's mother was taken aback, as she found it hard to believe that Mark could have done such a thing. However, the news brought relief to Roger's family, as they were hopeful that the detectives would work diligently to clear Roger's name. A friend of Roger's approached the police in 1991 when Donna was murdered, and then again in 1999 with information that could exonerate him. According to this friend, she was with Roger when someone called him, prompting Roger to jot down Donna and Mark's address. This piece of information led the police to believe that Roger may not have been the killer, but rather someone lured to his death. The detective began to entertain the notion that Roger may not have been directly involved in the murder, but rather someone who was deceived and manipulated by another party, most likely Mark Winger. On August 23, 2001, as the investigation into Donna's murder continued, the police conducted surveillance on Mark and Rebecca's home. However, Mark became suspicious and confronted the officers. He told them to leave him and his family alone and to stop following him. Meanwhile, as the police surveilled Mark's home, a grand jury meeting was deliberating. Little did he know that his fate would soon be sealed. A short while later, the grand jury indicted Mark for the murder of Roger and Donna. This indictment meant a formal charge against him, and a warrant was issued for his arrest. The police received word that Mark was at work and promptly made their way to the location. They called out Mark's name as they arrived, and he emerged from the building with his hands up. Mark realized that he had been caught and surrendered to the authorities. During this entire ordeal, Rebecca stood by her husband, Mark. She believed in his innocence and was determined to support him through this difficult time. Being 6 years old, Bailey, their daughter, witnessed the events as they unfolded. However, as time went on, Rebecca's support for her husband waned as she began to see the truth. Mark's trial began in May 2002. The state sought to prove Roger Harrington went to the Winger home for a meeting and not to commit murder. His attorney argued that Roger had a mental illness and had exhibited erratic behavior, raising doubts about his mental state and the possibility of committing murder. However, the state believed that Mark had lured Roger to the house for a meeting to address the issue. It was alleged that Roger willingly entered Mark's home, which explained why there was no forced entry. During the meeting, Mark fatally shot Roger in the head while Donna, with their baby, was in the bedroom. Donna heard the gunshot and ran out of the room, leaving her baby on the bed. When she came out, Mark started beating her with a hammer. When Mark thought Donna and Roger were dead, he called 911. During the call, Roger Harrington can be heard moaning in the background. Mark then informed the dispatcher that their baby was crying, and he had to go, promising to call them right back. However, no baby can be heard at the back end of the call. The state argued that Mark needed to ensure that Roger was truly dead, leading to the second shot being fired into his head. Mark was found guilty of murder and was sentenced to life without parole. Later, Mark was charged with first-degree murder for hire, as he was alleged to have plotted to kill Dean Schultz and a childhood friend who refused to post bail for him. Mark, however, claimed that he was merely scheming in an imaginary murder-for-hire plot, stating that it was not intended to be taken too seriously. Despite Mark's claims, he was ultimately convicted of solicitation of murder and sentenced to an additional 35 years in prison. After Mark was convicted of double murder and was sentenced to serve time in prison, Rebecca and her children were forced to distance themselves from him. In order to protect herself and her children, Rebecca decided to change their surname back to her maiden name, Simic. Rebecca believed that it could be beneficial for Bailey to meet Donna's family. She thought that they could provide her with valuable insights about Donna. One Memorial Day weekend, Bailey made the journey to Donna's hometown to meet the people who loved her. Bailey's encounter with Donna's family proved to be an eye-opening experience. She was amazed to see how much they still loved and cherished her, considering her a grandchild despite her absence. While Bailey was staying with Donna's family, it coincidentally happened to be her birthday. They decided to throw her a party to make up for all the birthdays she had missed over the years. The meeting with Donna's family had a profound impact on Bailey. It taught her about the power of love, the resilience of the human spirit, and the importance of family. Despite the distance that had been created through Mark's crimes, Donna's family's love for her remained strong. Bailey's birthday celebration also showcased the warmth and generosity of Donna's family as they made an effort to make up for the birthdays she had missed. Story 5. Crystal Rogers, a 35-year-old mother from Bardstown, Kentucky, was known for her dedication to her children. She lived 45 miles southeast of Louisville and shared custody of her 4 children with her ex-husband, Keith. Despite their separation, Crystal and Keith maintained an amicable relationship for the sake of their children. Her youngest son, who was only 2 years old at the time, was with her current boyfriend, Brooks Houck. Because Crystal had always been a reliable and responsible parent, her mother, Sherry Ballard, found it strange when she failed to answer her phone on July 5, 2015. Crystal usually responded to Sherry's calls, but the lack of communication was causing Sherry growing concern. It had been 24 hours since Sherry last heard from her daughter, and with each passing hour, her worry intensified. Crystal's absence was out of character, and Sherry's maternal instincts were telling her something was amiss. Sherry couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Sherry tried contacting Crystal multiple times throughout the day, but her efforts went unanswered each time. She decided to reach out to Crystal's friends and family, hoping someone would know where Crystal might be. Unfortunately, no one had seen or spoken with her recently. Around the same time, Brooke, Crystal's younger sister, contacted Sherry to inform her that she, too, had been unable to reach Crystal. Brooke shared with her mother that she had spoken with Brooks Houck, Crystal's boyfriend. Brooks informed her that he had not seen Crystal since Friday. According to Brooks, the last time he saw her, she was up playing games on her phone before he went to bed. When Brooks woke up the next morning, Crystal was gone. He speculated that Crystal may have gone to visit her cousin's house to celebrate the 4th of July. However, Sherry's concern grew as she struggled to get in touch with her daughter. Sherry reported Crystal missing to the police department, and as she was there, her son, Casey, received a phone call from a friend who had seen Crystal's car on the side of the road. This discovery worried Casey and his father, Tommy Ballard, as they knew Crystal would not have abandoned the vehicle of her own accord. Upon receiving the call, Casey and Tommy felt a sense of dread in their stomachs. Upon arrival at the location, Casey and Tommy saw Crystal's car, which had a flat tire. However, This discovery only reinforced their belief that something was seriously wrong. If Crystal had encountered car trouble, she would have certainly reached out to one of them for assistance. The idea that she would have pulled over and tried to fix it on her own was unfathomable. As they examined the car further, Casey and Tommy noticed Crystal's keys, phone and purse on the passenger seat. These items served as additional evidence that something was amiss. Crystal would not have gone anywhere without her belongings, and their presence in the car further heightened their fears for her well-being. After Crystal's father and brother found her vehicle on the Bluegrass Parkway, they promptly notified the Nelson County Sheriff's Department. Investigators arrived at the scene and examined Crystal's car. Despite finding no signs of a struggle, something stood out to them. The driver's seat seemed out of place for someone of Crystal's height. This peculiar observation raised suspicions that someone else may have been driving her car. As the authorities continued their investigation, they sought assistance from any witnesses who may have noticed something on the parkway. However, no one came forward with any valuable information. The police decided to turn to the media in the hope of generating leads from the public. They released Crystal's photo and appealed to the public for assistance in finding her. Unfortunately, no one came forward with any significant leads. Tommy, Crystal's father, organized search parties to locate her. Unfortunately, the hot and humid weather made the searches difficult. Many individuals showed up to help look for Crystal, but one notable absence was her boyfriend, Brooks Houck. The police became suspicious of Brooks' apparent lack of concern regarding Crystal's disappearance, since she was not only the mother of his child. When detectives questioned Brooks, he claimed that Crystal and their son had accompanied him to his family's farm the previous evening. According to Brooks, they returned home around midnight, after which he went to bed. He stated that Crystal remained awake, engrossed in her phone as she often did, playing games. Brooks claimed that when he woke up at 7 a.m., his son was already in bed with him, but Crystal was nowhere to be found. Initially, he speculated that Crystal may have gone out with her cousin. However, those who know Crystal well contradicted this claim, as she never would have left her son behind. Crystal and her 2-year-old were attached at the hip. Brooke, Crystal's sister, believed Crystal was planning to leave Brooks. According to Brooke, Brooks had lied to Crystal and failed to show an emotional attachment to her. Crystal had confided in her mother, Sherry, that she wanted to leave Brooks, but admitted that it would not be easy because he was controlling. Casey, Crystal's brother, had also recently noticed tension between Brooks and Crystal and witnessed several heated arguments. The police asked Brooks to come to the police station to take a polygraph test, which came back inconclusive. Afterward, Brooks sat with the police for a formal interview. Detectives had collected footage that confirmed details of Brooks' story. A video showed his truck going into his family's farm, and the footage revealed the car leaving the property around midnight. However, because Brooks' truck had tinted windows, the police couldn't see who was inside the vehicle at the time. According to Brooks, while at his parents' farm, he did chores, set a fire for building materials, and waited for the fire to die before driving home. During the interview, the police inquired about a short phone call that Brooks had on his way back from his parents' farm with a business associate, Steve Lawson, that lasted for only 13 seconds. In order to clarify matters, Brooks decided to have Steve Lawson explain the conversation to the police during the interview and call him. Steve Lawson said he had called Brooks to acquire the numbers for a rental property. However, the police found this claim suspicious, as it seemed like a scripted response. Steve Lawson explained Brooks told him that he needed to wait until he got home because Crystal was the one who handled that type of stuff. The police expressed confusion, wondering why Brooks, who was in Crystal's company at the time of the call, had to wait to talk to her in person. They questioned why Brooks could not have handed her the phone and had the conversation right then and there. In the midst of Brooks' interview, he received a phone call from his brother, Nick, an officer at the Bardstown Police Department. Nick advised Brooks to exit the interrogation room immediately. The police were not convinced that Crystal had run away and abandoned her car on the side of the Bluegrass Parkway. It seemed to the police that something had happened to Crystal while she was at the Brooks Hawk family farm. As the investigation into Crystal's disappearance continued, People called the police and reported seeing Brooks' truck and his brother Nick's police car at the Hawk family farm. Detectives became convinced that the brothers were at the farm disposing of evidence in Crystal's disappearance. To gather more information, the police decided to call in Nick, Brooks' brother, for questioning. They confronted him with the fact that he had been spotted at his family's farm on July 8th and asked him to explain why he had been there. However, Nick denied having any knowledge of what they were talking about and claimed not to have been out there that night. Despite Nick's denial, the police pressed on and asked him to point blank if he and his brother had destroyed or hidden evidence involving Crystal's disappearance. Nick adamantly denied that they had engaged in wrongdoing and insisted that his brother could not harm someone. Furthermore, he said there was no conceivable scenario where he, as a police officer, would have assisted Brooks in covering up a crime. After the interview, the police asked Nick if he would be willing to take a polygraph test, and he agreed. Nick failed the polygraph on 2 questions. The first question was, "Do you know where the crystal is right now?" The second question was, "Are you hiding any information about what happened to the crystal?" Despite failing the polygraph, Nick maintained that he was being 100% honest. On October 15th, the police investigating Crystal's disappearance named her boyfriend, Brooks Houck, as the prime suspect. On the same day, Brooks' brother Nick was fired from Joss as an officer at the Bardstown Police Department for impeding their investigation. Even though the police were fairly sure they knew who caused Crystal's disappearance and how she died, they didn't have enough evidence to make an arrest. The police feared taking their suspect to court and not having enough evidence. If the suspect were to get acquitted, the police couldn't charge them with Crystal's murder again because of double jeopardy. FBI agents and law enforcement agencies across Kentucky joined forces with Crystal's friends, family, volunteers, and missing people organizations to conduct extensive searches at the Houck family farm, a sprawling property spanning 240 acres. The searches continued daily, leaving Crystal's loved ones terrified and grasping for hope. While they hoped to find Crystal alive and well, they truly desired some answers. At the Houck family farm, investigators conducted a thorough search of the ashes of a fire, but no human remains were uncovered. However, in the pile of ashes, remnants of clothing were found. But the investigators were unable to connect these pieces to the case of Crystal's disappearance. The police served multiple search warrants on the Houck family farm, targeting cars and residences. Despite their efforts, none of these searches yielded significant leads or evidence related to Crystal's case. A $100,000 reward was offered for information about Crystal's disappearance, but still no one came forward. Tommy Ballard, Crystal's father, followed every lead he got in Crystal's disappearance. He was determined to find his daughter and was not going to give up. Crystal's disappearance affected Tommy more than it did anyone else who loved her, because in January 1979, his pregnant sister was murdered by her husband and his friend. They shot and beat her, and then set her remains on fire and scattered them on a farm. The men who committed this heinous crime were eventually caught years later, and they were found guilty and sentenced to life in prison. Despite the challenges he faced, Tommy remained steadfast in his pursuit of Crystal's whereabouts. Tommy followed every lead, no matter how small or insignificant it may have seemed. He canvassed the neighborhood, conducted interviews, and reached out to anyone who might have information. Tommy, determined to find answers about his daughter's disappearance, allocated his savings towards hiring cadaver dogs in a private eye. With each passing day, he kept meticulous records of all the tips he followed and every clue he uncovered. His dedication to the investigation led him to meet frequently with the police to share his findings and seek their guidance. In November 2016, Tommy Ballard took his 11-year-old grandson, Crystal's son, out on an early morning hunting trip on their property. Tommy's wife, Sherry, watched them leave. As they departed, Sherry couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. She couldn't help but quickly pray to God, asking for a watchful eye over them in the woods. Sherry returned to her bed, trying to relax. However, only minutes later, a phone call would shatter her peace. As she picked up the receiver, Sherry recognized the voice of her grandson, Crystal's son. His voice was filled with panic and terror. "Mima, Papa has been shot," he cried. Her heart sank. Panic washed over her. She quickly rushed to the bathroom, grabbing clothes along the way. Her grandson was still crying on the phone, his voice trembling with fear, so she reassured him, telling him that she was calling 911. As she quickly dressed, Sherry's mind raced with thoughts of her husband's well-being. When Sherry arrived at the scene, she was immediately overcome with grief. She rushed over to Tommy, shaking him frantically. However, as she did so, she noticed a concerning sight. Blood began pouring out of his nose. The officers and witnesses who had arrived at the scene quickly pulled her off Tommy so that the medics could work on him. However, Sherry was already aware that her husband was gone. Tommy Ballard was pronounced dead at the scene. Tommy Ballard had been shot one time in the chest. Initially, the police claimed that Tommy's death was the result of a hunting accident. However, Sherry was furious upon hearing this declaration. She insisted that this was no hunting accident, but rather a murder. She exclaimed, "This is my husband and it's a murder and you know it." After an investigation into Tommy's death, investigators ruled out the idea that Tommy took his own life as the cause of death, as they determined that his weapon had not been fired. Additionally, the investigators ruled out the involvement of Tommy's 11-year-old grandson in the shooting. Eventually, the Kentucky State Police later informed the public that they were investigating the death as a murder. The Ballard family believes that Tommy was murdered because he was getting too close to uncovering the truth about what happened to his missing daughter. They think the people responsible for hurting Crystal wanted Tommy out of the way, fearing that he might reveal the truth. In 2022, the FBI conducted a 5-day investigation into the disappearance of Crystal. Investigators returned to the Houck family farm, hoping to find more evidence. The FBI's goal was to collect evidence that would help them hold the individual responsible for Crystal's disappearance accountable. Despite not revealing if any items of evidentiary value were recovered from the search, an FBI spokesperson confirmed in October 2022 that the agency would be analyzing all of the evidence collected at the FBI's lab in Quantico. As the investigation into Crystal Rogers' disappearance continued, the Kentucky Attorney General made a crucial decision to appoint a special prosecutor to assist in the prosecution of criminal charges related to the deaths of Crystal Rogers and her father, Tommy Ballard. Crystal's mother, Sherry Ballard, was aware of the appointment and wholeheartedly supported the decision. She believed this measure was necessary to ensure justice was served in her loved ones' cases. The appointment of a special prosecutor brought a fresh perspective and independent expertise to the case. Sherry Ballard recognized the importance of having a dedicated team of prosecutors focused on unraveling the complex web of evidence and bringing the perpetrators to justice. She believed that by having a dedicated prosecutor, there would be greater attention to detail and a more comprehensive understanding of the case. Sherry Ballard's commitment to seeking justice for Crystal and Tommy was unwavering. The special prosecutor had the necessary resources and knowledge to conduct a thorough investigation and gather the evidence required to present a compelling case in court. In addition to the appointment of a special prosecutor, Sherry Ballard also appreciated the fact that this decision demonstrated the seriousness of the case and the importance of holding those responsible for the deaths of Crystal and Tommy accountable. It sent a clear message that the justice system was taking this matter seriously and was determined to bring justice to the victims' families. In July 2023, a grand jury in Kentucky indicted a 32-year-old man named Joseph Lawson on 2 charges of conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence in relation to the case of Crystal's disappearance. 2 months later, Crystal's boyfriend, Brooks Houck, was arrested and charged with murder and tampering with physical evidence. The judge set Brooks' bond at $10 million and he was ordered to stay away from Crystal's family. Brooks Houck was arrested in 2022 for several traffic violations. He was required to pay a series of fines and was released. Many people in Bardstown were overjoyed when Brooks Houck was arrested for Crystal's murder. Although the news was devastating for everyone to come to terms with the reality that Crystal was not just missing but had been killed, there was a sense of satisfaction in knowing that justice would be served. The arrest of Houck brought a sense of closure and relief to those who were affected by Crystal's tragic death. It provided some measure of solace to know that the person who had taken her life was being held accountable for their actions. The community of Bardstown united behind Crystal's family and expressed support and solidarity during this difficult time. They hoped that the arrest would pave the way for justice to be served and that the perpetrator would receive a fair and just punishment. As the investigation continued and more information came to light, the community remained vigilant and hopeful that justice would prevail. Brooks Houck made his first appearance in court 1 month after his arrest in October 2023. However, his appearance was not in person but virtually. The hearing was a crucial moment in the case as prosecutors revealed new information regarding another unsolved murder in Bardstown. The judge asked Special Prosecutor Shane Young if they were looking into any other cases that may be linked to Crystal's case. According to the prosecutor, they were also investigating Tommy Ballard's death, Crystal's father, and felt the two murders were connected. In fact, the special prosecutor said they believed they were in possession of the gun that killed Tommy, claiming they purchased the firearm from Nick Houck and were currently testing it, but believed that gun killed Crystal's father. The special prosecutor has claimed that they bought a firearm from Nick Houck, who allegedly used a fake name during the sale. According to the prosecutor, the caliber of the rifle matches the one used to shoot and kill Tommy Ballard. They have mentioned 5 criteria they are examining, claiming that the gun has matched 4 of them so far. Crystal's grandfather and Tommy's father voiced their satisfaction upon hearing the special prosecutors linking the 2 murders in court. They expressed their hope for justice to be swiftly achieved in both cases. However, upon hearing about the allegations put forward by the special prosecutor, Rosemary, Brooks, and Nick Houck's mother refused to answer any questions. Furthermore, during the court hearing, the prosecutor also alleges that the Houck family had secretly recorded the grand jury proceedings. The prosecutor alleged that Brooks Houck's sister, brother, mother, brother-in-law, and mother's boyfriend were all involved in this illicit activity. According to the prosecutor, by secretly recording the proceedings, the Houck family sought to gain an unfair advantage and ensure their stories remained aligned. Attorneys for Brooks Houck filed a request to disqualify the Nelson County judge presiding over the case and request that he be replaced. The attorneys claim that the judge has had a hostile view of Brooks Houck since 2017, which they believe to be biased and unfair. Additionally, the attorneys argue that the bail set at $10 million is excessive and should be reconsidered. The attorneys argue that having a hostile judge on the case will greatly hinder Brooks' ability to receive a fair trial. They contend that the judge's previous comments and actions indicate a clear lack of impartiality. In addition to asking for disqualification, the attorneys also request that the court move swiftly in ruling on this matter, arguing that time is of the essence and that a new, unbiased judge should be put in place as soon as possible to ensure a fair and just outcome. Several weeks later, the Kentucky Appeals Court has ruled that Brooks Houck will remain in jail on a $10 million bond. Additionally, the court has issued a ruling on the case, officially denying Houck's request to dismiss the judge presiding over Brooks' trials. In December 2023, Stephen Lawson was indicted on 2 charges of conspiracy to commit murder and tampering with physical evidence. The media widely reported that Stephen Lawson had a son named Joseph Lawson, who had been arrested on charges related to the disappearance of Crystal. Story 6. Keith and Sherry Papini first met in middle school when he was in the 7th grade and she was in the 8th. They were each other's first kiss. Their friendship quickly blossomed, and they remained close throughout their teenage years. However, as time went on, they lost touch with each other and went their separate ways. Years passed, and Sherry moved on with her life. She married another man in 2006, but their marriage only lasted for 2 years. After the divorce, Sherry found herself single again. Little did she know, fate had other plans in store for her. One day, she unexpectedly ran into Keith, and sparks instantly flew. The years apart had brought them both growth and maturity, and they realized just how much they had missed each other. Keith and Sherry arranged a date to give their love another chance. From that moment on, their connection grew stronger with each passing day. Within a year of reconnection, Keith and Sherry knew they were meant to be together. They married in 2009, had 2 children, and lived in Redding, California. Sherry used to work in telecommunications, but after giving birth to her children, she quit her job and stayed home with her children. Keith continued to work at Best Buy as a member of the Geek Squad. From the outside, the Papini family seemed to have an ideal life. On November 2nd, 2016, Keith and Sherry Papini's image of the perfect life shattered when Keith arrived home to find his wife missing. It was unusual because Sherry was usually always home when Keith came home from work. Initially, Keith assumed Sherry had gone on a walk, but he became increasingly worried as time passed, and she never returned. Keith called the daycare center that his children attended to see if Sherry had picked up their children yet. To his surprise, the school secretary informed him that Sherry had not. Keith's concern for Sherry intensified, and he decided to check the Find My iPhone app on his phone. The app revealed that Sherry's phone was located at the end of the driveway. Without hesitation, Keith ran outside and searched the area. To his dismay, he found Sherry's phone lying on the ground with her headphones nearby. Even more unsettling, there were strands of hair entangled in the headphones. After Keith made the disturbing discovery of Sherry's phone and headphones at the end of the driveway, he contacted the authorities with the Shasta County Sheriff's Office. The Sheriff's Office immediately took Sherry's disappearance seriously and involved the FBI from the start of the ensuing investigation. Keith was determined to bring attention to Sherry's disappearance and pleaded for her safe return. Recognizing the importance of getting Sherry's name and face out to the public, Keith spoke to the media, hoping to generate support and assistance in finding her. The media played a significant role in amplifying the story of Sherry's disappearance. Sherry's beauty, blonde hair, and blue-eyed appearance made her case captivating to the public, and news channels eagerly covered every detail. Her perfect life as a devoted wife and mother only added to the intrigue surrounding her sudden disappearance. Once Sherry's disappearance became public news, the Shasta County Sheriff's Office began receiving a large number of tips. However, despite the sheer volume of information called into the police, none of the tips proved productive in the ongoing search for Sherry. As the investigation into Sherry's disappearance continued, investigators focused on examining Sherry's phone for any potential clues. Upon reviewing the contents, they discovered a heated text message exchange between Sherry and her husband, Keith, from a few months prior. This exchange raised suspicions among police, leading them to wonder if Keith could have been involved in Sherry's disappearance. Despite the potential suspicion, Keith proved to be cooperative with the police. He volunteered to take a polygraph test, hoping to help clear his name from any suspicion. Keith passed the polygraph. In addition to the text message exchange between Keith and Sherry, investigators uncovered several texts from men disguised under female names in Sherry's phone. Upon closer examination, it seemed as though Sherry was planning to leave Keith. On November 10th, 2016, the police tracked down one of the men from Sherry's phone and interviewed him regarding her whereabouts. According to the man, he and Sherry had met 5 years earlier at a restaurant while she was attending a work conference. The man stated he had no idea where Sherry was, but he had some insights into her relationship with her husband, Keith. During the interview, the man revealed that Sherry had a disregard for Keith and feared him. He had allegedly told Sherry that Keith was violent and abusive and would often keep her locked up in their home. After receiving the accusation from the man who knew Sherry that her husband Keith was abusive, the police launched an investigation to determine if there was truth to these accusations. However, after interviewing friends and neighbors of the couple, the police were unable to find any substantial evidence to support the notion that Keith was a violent individual. What the police learned from Keith and Sherry's friends was interesting. All the individuals expressed that Sherry was known for having a tendency to be dramatic and attention-seeking. This info led the police to consider the possibility that the allegations of abuse may have been exaggerated or fabricated. Several days after Sherry went missing on November 24, 2016, the police received a phone call at 4:32 a.m. on Thanksgiving morning. The caller informed the police that there was a woman on the side of I-5 who appeared to be in need of assistance. After receiving this information, the officers swiftly responded and headed to the location. Upon arriving at the scene, the police discovered a woman with chains and zip ties wrapped tightly around her. Due to her disheveled state, it took a few moments for the officers to realize that the woman was Sherry Papini, who had been missing for several days. The officers were relieved to find Sherry alive and quickly began the process of freeing her from restraints. They carefully removed her chains and zip ties, ensuring her safety. Once she was released, the officers transported Sherry to the hospital to receive medical attention. When Sherry arrived at the hospital, the severity of the situation became apparent. Sherry had multiple bruises covering her body, her hair was noticeably shorter, and a burn mark could be seen on her arm. She also had a bad rash on her arm. Additionally, her weight had declined to a dangerous level at only 87 pounds. While Sherry was recuperating at Woodland Memorial Hospital, the police attempted to interview her, but Sherry was too emotional to provide any details. Sherry would only cooperate if her husband, Keith, were present during the interview. As a result, Keith was allowed to stay in the room while Sherry recounted the incident. According to Sherry, she was out jogging when a dark-colored SUV driven by two women approached her. One of the women, who was older, disembarked from the vehicle and approached Sherry, brandishing a gun. The younger woman remained in the car. Sherry stated that she was forced into the back of the vehicle against her will. Prior to entering the SUV, Sherry retrieved her phone and headphones from the driveway and intentionally left them behind, along with strands of her hair. She said she did this to alert Keith that something was wrong. Sherry continued telling the story of her abduction to the police and her husband, Keith. She said that during the journey, she kept falling asleep in the back of the SUV, making it hard to keep track of time. Additionally, she mentioned that the two women had wrapped something around her face, preventing her from seeing where she was. According to Sherry, the two women informed her that they had kidnapped her because there was a man who wanted to buy her, and she was to be delivered to that person. They did not specify who the man was or where he was located. Sherry expressed fear and concern about her situation, as she had no idea where she was being taken or what would happen to her. During her captivity, Sherry claimed she was subjected to physical abuse by one of the two women she was being held with. According to Sherry, this woman would hit her frequently, leaving her with various injuries. Sherry also alleged that she was branded on her right shoulder with the word Exodus, which the woman said had been done to appeal to Sherry's buyer, who was allegedly a police officer. Sherry further stated that her captors played mariachi music frequently, which she found unsettling and disorienting. The constant playing of this type of music added to the atmosphere of her captivity, making it more isolating and oppressive. Sherry mentioned that she was confined to a single room with a boarded window. Regarding the living conditions, Sherry talked about a closet where she was chained. This closet served as a makeshift bathroom, as there was a bucket inside that she could use to urinate and defecate. About 3 weeks into her captivity, Sherry recalled hearing a gunshot. Following the gunshot, Sherry never saw the older Hispanic woman again. This sudden disappearance raised several questions in Sherry's mind. Was she killed? The younger woman, who had remained silent throughout the ordeal, now took charge. This woman ordered Sherry to get into a car, and they proceeded to drive along I-5. Suddenly, the car came to a stop. Sherry was startled by the sudden and unexpected halt. She looked around, trying to assess the situation. Then, the younger woman told Sherry to exit the vehicle. Confused and uncertain, Sherry cautiously complied. Sherry felt a mixture of fear and excitement as she exited the car. Was this her chance to escape, or was she being led into a more dangerous situation? She was left with no answers, only uncertainty. After Sherry was found on the side of I-5, the Shasta County Sheriff's Office held a press conference to announce her safe return. During the press conference, the police said Sherry had been abducted by two Hispanic women, sparking widespread concern among the public. However, the response to this news was not without consequences. Following the press conference, a wave of racism emerged, targeting individuals of Spanish descent. The reporting of Sherry's abduction had intensified public fear and anxiety, leading some to lash out at individuals perceived to be associated with the Hispanic community. When Sherry became settled back at home after her abduction, she started attending therapy sessions. Since Sherry lived in California, she became eligible for the Victims' Compensation Fund, which uses public funds to help pay for victims' therapy. In the aftermath of the abduction, Sherry started spending a significant amount of time in her house. She avoided going out as frequently compared to her previous lifestyle. 1 year into the investigation of Sherry's abduction, the police released a composite sketch of the 2 Hispanic women believed to be involved in the crime. However, despite this significant step, no leads came in. Additionally, the police revealed the discovery of male DNA on Sherry's underwear, which she was wearing when she was found on the side of I-5. The police said this DNA sample did not match that of Sherry's husband, Keith. 2 years had passed since Sherry's abduction, and the police still hadn't obtained a match on the male DNA found in her underwear. Despite their efforts, no leads emerged, and the case remained unsolved. However, in 2020, a breakthrough finally came. With renewed determination, the police working on Sherry's case sought authorization to utilize familial DNA techniques to locate the donor of the elusive DNA. This innovative approach allowed them to use the existing DNA profile to identify potential relatives of the donor. Familial DNA testing is a powerful investigative tool used in criminal investigations. It involves analyzing DNA evidence to determine if it matches any family members of a suspect. By identifying genetic markers shared between family members, investigators can narrow the list of potential suspects and identify potential familial relationships. When the police working on the Sherry Papini case got the family DNA match on the male DNA found in her underwear, they were surprised to see that it came back as a close relative to James Reyes, Sherry's ex-boyfriend. This development raised several questions and became a major turning point in the investigation. The police wondered if Sherry's ex-boyfriend could have been responsible for her abduction. In June 2020, investigators retrieved a soda bottle from James's trash and took it into the forensic lab for DNA testing. The forensic lab conducted DNA testing on the soda bottle. 1 month later, a lab tech called the police and informed them that James Reyes was a match to the DNA sample discovered in Sherry's underwear on the day she was found. After the police got the DNA match back, they conducted an interview at the Costa Mesa, California, home of James Reyes, a sports shop worker, regarding the case of Sherry, his former girlfriend. James provided a statement to the police, explaining that he had dated Sherry approximately 10 years earlier. He said the last time he saw Sherry was a year after they broke up, but he had heard rumors of her disappearance and subsequent safe return. During the interview, the police asked James if he was responsible for Sherry's kidnapping, and James denied having any involvement in her abduction. However, eventually during the interview with the police, James Reyes admitted to being good friends with Sherry despite their breakup 10 years ago. James said he did play a part in Sherry's disappearance, but he did not kidnap her, but rather was simply helping out a friend in need. According to James, Sherry had reached out to him, stating that she was attempting to escape from her abusive husband, Keith. James disclosed to the police on November 2, 2016, that one of his friends had rented a car for him, which turned out to be the same vehicle he used to pick up Sherry the following day. According to James, Sherry got in the back seat and laid down as he made the long drive back to Costa Mesa. Sherry confined herself to the bedroom throughout her stay at James' house. He continued with his daily routine, while Sherry occasionally assisted him by cleaning and cooking. She boarded up the bedroom window because she wanted the room door. While Sherry stayed with James, he noticed that she was intentionally trying to lose weight by eating as little as possible. James informed the police that Sherry requested his help in committing acts of self-harm against herself, specifically by hitting herself hard to create bruises. On one occasion, Sherry asked James to shoot a hockey puck off her knee, even though he was uncomfortable with the request. Despite his reservations, James complied, ultimately engaging in this harmful behavior with Sherry. James admitted to branding Sherry with Exodus on her right shoulder. He stated that they had purchased a wood-burning tool from Hobby Lobby specifically for the purpose of committing the act. According to James, one day, Sherry unexpectedly informed him of her decision to leave his house. Before departing, Sherry requested James to obtain chains and zip ties. Sherry instructed him to bind her securely before driving her back to Redding, California. During the drive, Sherry told James to pull over, which he did. She jumped out of the vehicle and James drove away. When the police asked James if he knew anything about the 2 Hispanic women Sherry claimed abducted her, he said he had no idea what she was talking about. When the police visited James' house, they were taken aback by the discovery of numerous rooms that matched descriptions given by Sherry when she talked about where she was held captive. Strikingly, James' bedroom and closet matched a drawing Sherry had made for the police, depicting the exact layout of the rooms she had experienced during her confinement. Furthermore, the police noticed a remarkable coincidence. A table at James' house closely resembled the one Sherry had mentioned in her early interviews with the police. Several days after the police had spoken to James Reyes, they scheduled an interview at the police station with Sherry and Keith. The police had gathered a significant amount of evidence, which they believed to be conclusive proof that Sherry had staged her abduction. During the interview, they were prepared to confront Sherry with their findings. Before the police confronted Sherry with the truth that she staged her abduction, they asked her if she wanted her husband Keith to leave the interview room. However, Sherry did not say anything. The police then made the decision to leave Sherry and Keith alone in the room for a few minutes. During this time, Sherry approached Keith and revealed to him that she didn't want the police to find the Hispanic woman who had abducted her. Sherry believed she owed her life to the woman because she had allowed her to go. She didn't want to press charges against her. Keith listened to Sherry's explanation. He then expressed his concerns because he didn't think Sherry was making any sense and was starting to get scared. He emphasized that regardless of Sherry's decision not to press charges, the woman would ultimately face consequences for her actions. The police returned to the interview room, and that was when Sherry and Keith were informed that the police had obtained a familial DNA match on the male DNA that had been found on Sherry's clothing. The name the police mentioned was James Reyes, her ex-boyfriend. Keith had a physical reaction upon hearing the name. He recognized James as Sherry's ex. After the shocking revelation that James Reyes, Sherry's ex-boyfriend, was a match to the male DNA found on her underwear, the police proceeded to inform Sherry and Keith that James had passed a polygraph test. The police said they thought Sherry staged her abduction. They also stated that they had gathered evidence to corroborate James's story, leading them to believe he was telling the truth. The police informed Sherry that they possessed information indicating that her dramatic weight loss during her disappearance was a deliberate choice on her part to consume fewer calories. They added that the rash on her arm was believed to have originated from the cleaning supplies she had utilized at James's residence. Furthermore, the police asserted that they had acquired knowledge that James had inflicted a brand upon Sherry using a wooden tool they had purchased from Hobby Lobby. Additionally, it was revealed that Sherry's broken nose was the result of an injury she had inflicted upon her using a hockey stick. Despite facing overwhelming evidence indicating she had staged her abduction, Sherry maintained her composure and acted as though she was oblivious to what the police were referring to. Sherry told the police that she hadn't seen James since they broke up years ago when she went to his brother's funeral in Southern California. However, the police informed Sherry that they knew that she was lying. James had provided them with information regarding her disappearance and details that no one else would know. On March 3, 2022, Sherry Papini was arrested by the FBI on charges of lying to federal agents and faking her abduction. 6 weeks after her arrest, she agreed to sign a plea deal with federal prosecutors, admitting that she had orchestrated her kidnapping. Sherry's attorneys had argued that she should receive a sentence of 1 month in prison, followed by 7 months of home custody. However, the state recommended an 18-month sentence. Several months later, in September 2022, Sherry was sentenced to 18 months in prison and ordered to pay a fine of $300,000. However, the judge stated there was little chance she could ever pay back the fine unless she won the lotto. During the sentencing hearing, the judge referred to Sherry as a manipulator and a habitual liar. The judge expressed that he had no doubt that she would have continued to lie if she hadn't been caught. The judge informed Sherry that she needed to be punished in order to deter others from committing copycat crimes. He explained that Sherry had taken advantage of several resources, including victims' funds, Social Security disability payments, and a GoFundMe account established following her alleged kidnapping. Sherry had obtained hundreds of thousands of dollars through these aids. By imposing a punishment on Sherry, the judge aimed to deter other individuals from committing similar crimes. Sherry addressed the court during her sentencing hearing, expressing her remorse and apologizing to the numerous people who had suffered due to her actions. She openly acknowledged her guilt, stating that she was responsible for lying and bringing dishonor upon herself and those around her. In August of 2023, Sherry was granted her release and was placed in a halfway house. Keith and Sherry separated on the day she was arrested in March 2022. A few days after Sherry pled guilty the following month, Keith filed for divorce. He also sued for full custody of their children. As the rain falls and the night deepens, thank you for being here with me at Radio Night Crime. True crime stories remind us of life's mysteries and the need to stay aware, even in the stillness of the night. If you enjoyed tonight's story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Let the sound of the rain lull you to sleep, and until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night keep you company.